Hi, I'm Chris Stern, Master of Development Practice student at the University of California, and for this MDP Chat, I spoke with Professor Isha Ray of the Energy and Resource Group here at Berkeley. She's our resident expert on community-driven development, and she is here with us now. How do you define community-driven development?
The way I like to define it is that it's a development project or a development enterprise that has a very serious partnership with the community for whom and in which the development activity is taking place. So that it doesn't become an activity done to people or even done for people, but is as close to being done with them as possible.
What makes a situation or project particularly suitable for community-driven development? Are there any indications or contraindications?
If you just think about the scale of the community, as opposed to the broader political economy in which they're operating, which also makes a big difference, of course. But let's set that aside for now. If you just think in terms of the scale of the community, a community has to function as a community. It has to have some sense of belonging as an entity. It can't be just a disparate group of households that happen to be geographically located in one place. That does not make a community. A community has to operate as a community.
How does community-driven development interface with social movements and other forms of communal or collective action?
I think about that a lot. I think that CDD was a social movement before it became called CDD. Before it became anointed as the new thing, It was a social movement. These were groups and communities, towns or villages or schools or whatever, that wanted to kind of own and have a stake in what development was. Not just what development should be, but what development was from their value systems, their perspective, and their political reality. So I think in its original sense, the drive towards CDD was a kind of social movement, a kind of counter to the top-down, parachuting down type of CD development that had become common practice. And that's still common practice in many ways. Where it begins to diverge from a classic social movement, I think, is as it moves more and more towards a streamlined outcome orientation. That's not to say that moving towards a streamlined outcome orientation is a bad thing. It might be great for the community, actually. But it starts to look less like a social movement and more like a development program with a big D.
What are some of the main points of contention or controversy within community-driven development today?
There are people who want to, I think with the best intentions, streamline CDD into a set of best practices that we can then make replicable, transferable, and so on. And development policy kind of needs that in order to be called a policy, right? You cannot have one policy for one village, some other policy unrelated for a second village is too much, right? But there are critics of that form of CDD or that position on CDD who argue that you are going to lose something really fundamental if you try to streamline CDD into a replicable, transferable, portable set of best practices. That the point of CDD is the C, the community-drivenness of it. And therefore, it's not clear that you should start from the beginning with the kind of, here are the parameters within which I'm going to do this CDD project. Much more than a development or economic disagreement, to me, this is fundamentally a political and philosophical disagreement. And that's why it's not going to be easy to resolve those definite differences by pointing to, well, who has the better education outcome or who has the better public health outcome. Fundamentally, the streamlined CDD people think about CDD instrumentally as a means to a set of outcomes, and the more open truly a community-based, grassroots-oriented CDD people think of CDD as a process.
What advice would you give to aspiring community-driven development practitioners?
I think if you're an aspiring community-driven development practitioner, you have to embrace the importance of process as much as you embrace the importance of outcome. This is the key thing. This is the key thing that distinguishes CDD from not CDD. Is it is as much about the journey, as they say, as the destination. Not all development practitioners are that way, and nor do they have to be. But I think if CDD is where you want to be, you have to embrace the journey and the process as much as the outcome. And you have to see success in the process as much as you see success in the outcome. This is essential.